Well, good afternoon, Bud, and it's so good to have you actually be here in the studio. And so Rob and Scott and Ernie and I, have been praying for you for quite a long time. And so it's just really an honor to have you be here. And what we're wanting to hear is what is it that's on your heart that the Lord has told you about running for governor of the state of Oregon?
Well, first of all, let me just say that thanks for having me. I've been feeling your prayers and being lifted up. It's a great comfort and a source of strength to me. And again, it's just a great pleasure and honor to be amongst such great friends. Mm-hmm. And in terms of running for governor of Oregon, if you knew me from the past, and people that know me from the past would really say, how can it be that you're running for governor of Oregon? Because my political interest was, I tried to understand what the candidates, who the candidates were and what the issues were, mm-hmm. and mark my ballot. And that was my political interest. And that was as I was moving along my medical career, which really was the center of my life. I always felt a calling to be a doctor. And that was really what I wanted to do. And happily I came to Salem after spending 33 years in education and training mm-hmm. to be a doctor in Salem. And it's so odd and interesting that I made it to Salem because it's a seat of political power happening in our state. That power is probably the wrong word, but political happening. Yeah. I like that mm-hmm. word more in our state. So I find myself in Salem, and I joined the medical society so that I could meet other doctors, really, because mm-hmm. it was private practice. And then I ascend the ranks of medical politics, and you more and more touch upon the political class. And I remember listening at some point, I was at an event with Governor Kitzhaber, and it just came upon me that someday I should run for governor. It just came like that, whether it was God speaking to me or it came to my mind, I should. And it was probably 5 years before I actually decided to run. And then when Governor Kitzhaber resigned, I just said in my mind, or my heart, my mind, the voice really said, it's time to run. Mm-hmm. So I called up Jackie Winters, who was my friend and senator, and the reason that I actually became a Republican, I was really more of an unaffiliated person all along my life, and I become a Republican so I could support her, and I wanted to do that. And she goes, I think that's a great idea, Bud. She goes, I have no idea if you can win or what you can do, but I think that's the right thing for you to do. So it's an interesting set of circumstances that drew me into politics. I obviously ran in 2016. That wasn't the time. I lost. And frankly, I don't know if this is a time for me or not, but I have a strong sense that I was brought to Salem to practice, so this is my calling, but also to be involved in the political process, however that leads me forward. And so right now I would say that I really think that my role right now is to speak to the public and speak to people about the issues that confront us from the fact that I'm a Christian man, and really to talk about them in that way. And I think that that's really what I'm called upon to do right now. Whether or not I'm actually called to be the governor is completely unknown to me. I know that I am to run. I know I'm to seek office. I'm completely comfortable in that. But whether or not that is what I'm to do going forward or something else, I don't know. I just go on the path and I just go forward.
Well, and what I really like about what I'm hearing you say is that you felt that tug on your heart to do something different than what you already were doing. And I kind of, as you were saying that, I thought, wow, that's pretty much like, people that were fishermen and now they're with Jesus, or they were a tax collector or whatever. So lots of times what they were doing previously, they laid aside, to do exactly what Jesus would have them to do. And that's kind of what he does in all of our lives. Mm-hmm. And so it's exciting to me to hear that you listened to that little tug, you took the step that needed to be, and you're trusting him to unfold the path, and you're willing to do what he's asked you to do.
You're a great minister. I really like together for you. That's great. I really like that. And it really does feel like that. Again, I've been called to do things. I know that, and I've been called to do this. I know that. But again, I want to be clear on that. One never knows where life's going to take us. And all we're doing, when we're called, we're set up on the journey. Obviously, our God knows the journey we've been on before, we're on now, where it's going, but we don't have that information. So I just go forward.
Well, and the other thing that I really like about what you're doing is that, you know, so many of us are just ordinary people. I mean, like all of us in this room, we're just ordinary people, and yet we love Jesus, and we love our city, and we love our state, and we love our country, but sometimes we feel like no one hears our voice. And that's what I think I'm seeing through you, is that, you know, you're willing to hear what we're saying, and you're willing to say, you know what, I'm willing to work hard to pay attention to what you're saying and to represent you in government. So,
Amen to that.
yeah, that's what I
You're
think
right.
I hear you
You're
saying.
Right. You're right.
You know, so, you know, kind of share with us some of the things that are, you know, just especially on your heart for the state of Oregon. What do you feel like you're hearing the people say? I mean, you know, are they mentioning to you that they feel frightened with the crime, or maybe all of the homelessness, or, you know, what are the things that seem to be kind of standing out to you, and how do you want to address that?
Correctly, universally in our state, people are talking about the lack of safety. And you know, I'm in the Salem, Portland area, although I come out to the coast here one day a week to practice also. But universally, it's fear of violence against them. The destruction of personal and public property is really probably number one on their minds. And yesterday I was along the coast. I was in Astoria, and we went down to Gold Beach and to Eugene and to Florence. It was so interesting because the comments at some public gatherings there that had been put into place just the same as I'm hearing everywhere else in the state. And then the homeless situation and how difficult that is. First of all, especially when you hear from a lot of Christian people, is the suffering of the homeless on the streets, and the untreated mental illness, and the untreated alcoholism, and the untreated drug addiction, and how that's so degrading to the people, and also degrading to us, because to live in that is so demoralizing. Look at us as this advanced society of knowledge and power and wealth, and ever more people are at the worst level of failure. And you know, what can really be done about that? In terms of the first two, as you talk about what can be done, clearly when people break the law, commit violent acts against people or property, they have to be arrested and held accountable. And that's just how it has to be. That's when we're off track. I know anyone in this room, I always say, if I'm really off track, I want someone to stop me before I hurt somebody. And that's what I need for my good, more than it's society's good. So we need to have that firm. It's a loving hand of correction, but it's firm. And there should be a sense that too, because when people already cross that line, they already kind of crossed some moral barriers. So society, I think, has to weigh in and say, we're going to make it very uncomfortable for you to do this kind of act. Not so much that we need to punish you, that maybe there's a part of that, but really to try to change your behavior so that you don't want to do it again. And there's a hesitancy on you because the moral rules have not held you back. So I think that's very important. So it's, again, there's that part of that, so that people are safe, and you need whatever police and law enforcement you need. That's, again, reality, because you need the firm hand of the law that's in an organized way under government control, so that people are stopped from breaking the law and their behaviors change, so they're all safer. So that's a really important one. In the homeless situation, there's already attempts to do what needs to be done, which is try to transform lives. And it's a life transformation. So people have to be taken off the street into a real shelter, and there are all kinds of innovative programs. There are programs that make you start at a very low level of sheltering and let you move up as you are more successful in internalizing the controls you need to function in society. So, and right away there's people around. In almost every case, mental health is treated right away. You're not allowed to do drugs and alcohol. You just have to get off of it so your mind clears. And then you take steps to head toward being able to work and contribute, because people that work and contribute to life and contribute to a bigger cause than just themselves, then those people then have an anchor to their life, and they take care of themselves, and they're not destructive, and they're not harmful to others and not destructive to themselves. So people have to be, as you would say, cleaned up, and certainly mental illness has to be treated, but then you have to go on the path towards some kind of work, some kind of participation,
Right.
some kind of contribution. And if you can get to those two, to that place, then it's a lot easier for them to be part of our mainstream culture, and again, not to be so self-destructive, because self-destructive people are very expensive, and both financially but also morally and just effort-wise to our society. We have to move them away from that. And then people always say, well, there will be people that won't do that. They'll just tell you no. Well, then I think you have a couple of choices in that situation. It's not against the law to be poor or homeless, but it is against the law, in my mind, if you have good programs that help you and you won't do them. And you're not, and they're being paid for you. We're really, trying to do everything we can for you. So at that point, I think a good solution would be a secure shelter, so you don't get to come and go, or incarceration, frankly. Those are your choices. I think a lot of people, we can get them on the right path. Again, you have to reward and encourage people to do the right thing for their own good, and you have to try to make it so it's uncomfortable and not where they want to go to do things that are harmful to them, which makes us have a judgment. And I think that a lot of our programs fail because they don't allow us to judge good and bad behavior, things that people should or shouldn't do. And we have to build that back into our programs. It can't be arbitrary, but if you come at it from compassion and hope and love and transparency,
Right.
so people can see, we just have to go that way, because these programs have to be programs that have a funding floor, which is government, because that way the program won't go away. That can't be, but on top of that, the actual people who are doing the life transformation are almost assuredly non-government people, because it's got to be a calling, it's got to be a mission, it's got to be a life transforming.
Right.
So I think that's probably the main thing. And the other things we talk about, education and training and how that has to be made so much better. We can talk about that and let everyone recognize our public education system is failing us on so many fronts. And what that means, it fails children. And as being someone who grew up in a family where my father was a retired E5 sergeant and a custodian for the school district, and had, I think, a GED, and my mom had some education in Germany, but was really a dental assistant. The only way I could get anywhere near to where I am is great public education and training by great teachers, by a society that would invest in me and contributed mightily to me. And then I could hopefully pay back just a small part of that debt through my work and my service to society. So, but again, and the children who need great public education most of all are the kids that are like me, that grew up, and the people that are, quote, disadvantaged. I didn't look at my life as disadvantaged, but I can see now that affluent parents are going to figure out and have the resources to figure out how to get their kids educated and trained. And it's the kids that come from non-affluent families that need that great public education process. So we have a lot of work to do.
Right.
Well, and I think what I'm hearing you say is that, sometimes our compassion for those who are perhaps homeless, sometimes we jump to a conclusion that if they just had a house, then they would be just fine. There'd be no problem, so, just build them a house and everything will be fine. But kind of what I'm hearing you say is that beyond that you actually are not just caring about them having a house, you actually are caring about them being a whole, complete person.
Correct.
Physically, mentally, emotionally, as well as spiritually. And so I'm glad to hear that that's like what you're focusing on, because that really is the cry of our heart. As we look at people, we don't want to just throw money at something. We want to actually help them, like you're saying, to be, successful, to get to be a part of contributing. And I look at how, yes, maybe your father and your mother were not, like Ivy League graduates or whatever, but I see how, like, along the way, other people took time to care about you and to give you that hand up. And it sounds like to me that as governor of the state of Oregon, you would want to be known for giving a hand up, whether it's to the homeless or whether it's through our education of small children or in our colleges. So I like that.
And from our faith, even reforming the criminals, because if you look at the background of a lot of criminals, I talk about my modest upbringing, but I had competent, loving parents who took care of me. And if you do that for the first 2 years of life, generally you can reach your full potential. All the people that are struggling with criminality and imprisonment, they come from mothers that while they were in the womb may have used drugs or alcohol, which is incredibly damaging. And if you don't get that nurturing the first 2 years of life where people just hold you and caress you and kiss you and love on you and actually do your physical needs, if you don't get that, you're damaged for life. And so we have a lot of work with our prisoners that once the time is paid, that how do we help them transition into society. So again, just like when we're talking about people living on the streets, have to have something to do, have to be put into an environment where that thing can be done, have to be overseen, and they have to be nurtured. And again, it sounds like a lot of trouble, but if you look at the cost and the trouble and what we face by not doing those things, the costs are tiny if you do the right thing compared to doing the wrong thing, which is what we're doing, which is to generally address the physical needs and not deal with the emotional, spiritual needs and the life-transforming attempts. And people really want to do that. People really care about people and want to help you. There's so many people out there that want to do it. So that's the interest I have without enabling. And what I would say is compassion and doing the right thing isn't weak and it isn't soft. It really requires you to be firm about it. And it gets its firmness and not in any way enabling self-destructive behavior and trying to extinguish it. And that takes firmness, whether you're raising children that are into that, or if it's even more troubling when it's adults. But you have to be firm, and it's not weak.
Right, right. And we appreciate that. We appreciate the fact that that's the cry of your heart for our state. And we want to be able to get the message out that you're willing to do the work that it takes to help to turn our state around. We want to be actually known, or at least I think I'm speaking for myself and those in this room, is that kind of our state for quite some time has been known for, more death kind of things.
Right.
I mean, euthanasia, abortion,
Right.
all of these kinds of things that, take away life. And so it's like we want for the state of Oregon to be known for the beauty of the state and for life, and that when people come here that they will have that hand up that they need to be what they have dreamed to be.
And the governor is a leader and a motivator. The work, if we're going to do this, and this is going to come off the way I imagine it can, is again the state will put in resources, but it's frankly going to take our Christian community and frankly people certainly of other religions who feel the calling to help and transform lives that are broken and really almost destroyed and in many ways not worth living to the person who's living it, and be involved with transforming those lives. All the governor can do is set up the structure, give the encouragement, break down the barriers that are preventing that from happening, but you have to do the work. You have to engage. It's society. And that's such a great calling, because usually Christians say, well, what can I do? What can I do? And you kind of get isolated into that sense of your own church and your own religious group that you belong to. But what can I do? And we all know that we feel the best. And on Easter, our church is going out to the mission and serving foods and such. But I believe that Christians can rise up and transform society into the society we want through our work and how we help people, because our calling is obviously to worship our Lord and to help our neighbors, our brothers and sisters when they're in trouble. And there's no greater way to take on the challenge of those who are struggling the most, and it's such a great calling. And so if I'm elected governor, Christians are going to get the chance. And
that's wonderful.
We're going to get the chance.
We would be honored to be able to partner, with you. And it's like there's so many different aspects. I think about one of the programs that actually was done on kind of a national level, where where Christian people actually went out to like the farms, where there was like food and things like that, and they realized that there would maybe be elderly or shut-in people more in like a metropolitan area, where they wouldn't have an opportunity, you know, for, you know, like fresh produce and things. And so they put together like these packages, you know, to provide, you know, fresh, you know, fruits and vegetables for, you know, people in the inner city. And so, I mean, I look at those things and I think how exciting, you know, that we would be able to partner with you as our governor.
And we have, and in my vision, again, we have simple rules and structure that you have to have anytime you try to organize an effort. But within those simple rules and structures, amazing creativity and freedom to act. Because any person you engage with or family to try to change is going to be unique with unique needs. And so we're not going to be able to do have a checklist of 25 things you do and you've done your job. Number one, that almost assuredly the job won't get done. So we're looking for people that want to connect with people that fit, that can connect with their personality, who really feel like they can, not only they want to help, but they can help. And so it'll be a very interesting time to take on those kinds of programs, and there'll probably be a variety of programs with a variety of contributors, and again, each uniquely situated so that the right help at the right time in the right way will occur to transform lives. And if we go about that in a way, and you just think about our state and what that would do to our own attitudes, and to go through, walk through our streets and to feel safe unless some random bizarre event occurs, to walk along and not to see homeless people suffering, not to have people that are half out of their minds stumble up to you and frighten you. And again, just seeing, you would just see the whole morale and the calmness and the stress fall in society. And you know, one of the things that a doctor is trained to do is to ratchet down the stress. And I think right now we're in a time where there's just too much anger, too much hostility, too much hatred, and it doesn't do anything for us. And part of it is the stress of the daily life, of the suffering that's playing in on that. And also certainly the tone of leadership that needs to be much more conciliatory and much more calm and much more encouraging, irrespective of the person's political, frankly, or any other belief. And get focused on what we can do to make the world a better place, and the way we can do it in a practical way, and that we can play out our Christian faith and our beliefs and our worship of our God, is to help those that are suffering the most in a way that's not enabling to them, to the suffering and destructive, but lifting them up and creating a government that gives us a chance. So right now, one of the challenges people would say is, well, how, if you talk about religion in our society, you're basically canceled, ostracized, or fired. I mean, you really are. And you can't have religious programs of any kind into any program the government funds. Excuse me. The First Amendment says there will be no state religion, and the reason you don't want a state religion is because anything that's put in like that is worthless. It doesn't mean anything. It's an abomination to religion, the worship of God. But it says you are free to take your religious beliefs and to express them in your, you know, wherever you want to go, the public or private, and you're free to take those in there. And of course, it's going to be respectful. It's not to be argumentative. That'd be anti-Christian. I mean, that's, you don't go there. But again, right now we have a lot of work on the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion. And I would argue that by not allowing people to discuss differences. I mean, there are differences in the Christian churches, and Christian and non-Christian, and other, you know, there's all these differences amongst people. But if you work next to Mary or John or whoever it is, and you really like them, and you spend time with them, and you find out that they're of a different whatever you imagine, and then you listen to them talk about what they're a part of, then you get to understand them and what they believe in, and it doesn't put you off, and it doesn't make you antagonistic to that view. So the way to get away from our disagreements, our inability to seemingly accept people of other experiences and beliefs and faiths, is to actually engage them and talk about it. And then again, we who are Christians feel strongly that through the power of the Lord, that through our actions and through our words, we can bring people to Christ. But on a practical level, just a practical level, it'll allow us to understand and accept one another, and again, take down the tension, take down the hatred, take down the anger, and so that we can again live in harmony. And it's through freedom that we live in harmony, not saying you can't say this, you can't say this, or you will say this, or you won't say that.
Well, and the beauty of what you're talking about is that I see the unity and the peace that brings. And then the other thing is that, as you were talking about, you know, just feeling safe and whatever, then I began to think about the small businesses. I mean, I love small businesses because I feel like they're the very backbone of our country. And so it's like when there's, safety because, you're not being afraid that somebody's going to burn down your business or break the windows out or do all those kinds of things, then I think that, people who have small businesses, they can thrive and they can prosper, and as they prosper, the rest of us prosper, and so it just builds like a whole community that is, a joy to live in. And I think that it's kind of like it talks about that when the righteous rule, the people rejoice, and when the unrighteous rule, the people groan. And so I think that we've been groaning for a long time, and so we're looking to a man like you that would bring us to a place where we could rejoice.
Well, I would do my best. If you have to get there, and I would do my best. And I love small business. My medical practice has kind of got a little bit larger than small business, but it's that variety, and it's that intimacy, and that's human connectedness, and the unique products. There's corporate is fine. Corporate gives you a nice floor of products and services, but it doesn't give you that specialness of it. It doesn't give you that flavor, that salt, and it doesn't give you that. So, and again, as a small business person, I'm well aware that a lot of times the larger businesses use actually government to carve out advantage in their good or service they produce, not for the purpose of disadvantaging small businesses, but for the purpose of advantaging themselves. But when they get that advantage, it de facto disadvantages the small businesses. So I'm for helping businesses and work thrive, because I think all of us, almost all of us, need that good work to do, either owning or working in a business, so we have a meaningful life. But I think that every advantage that goes to the bigger businesses need to filter down to the small ones, and there's a lot of practical ways to do that. So if I am there, we'll also have, from a structural and practical point of view, the reality that small businesses will not be disadvantaged compared to the large businesses, and therefore they can not only be here, but as you say, be more prosperous.
Right.
I like the sound of that.
Yes, absolutely. And then as I think about, you mentioned before, children, and you mentioned before about education, and quite obviously, you did well through our public education system, and and we look at you and we see how you became a very successful doctor who has touched the lives of so many people. But it's like sometimes when we look at, like you're talking about, that if you're affluent, you perhaps are able to put your child in a private school, or whatever it is that you choose to do. So kind of when you look at our children here in the state of Oregon as governor, what would you want to do to help families and children?
Sure. So again, in terms of the educational system, having spent a long time in education and training, 33 years, which means I was a little slow. But that being said, the best teaching environment is to have a great teacher with great knowledge of the subject being taught, great leadership skills. So again, you really need that leader in the classroom, and I don't think we emphasize that nearly enough. And anytime I had a great learning experience, I had a great teacher, and leading me in that endeavor. The environment of the classroom needs to be one that allows learning to occur, or wherever it occurs. I've been trained in clinics, and I've been trained in a lot of places, but the environment has to be suitable to learning and having teaching. If people are disruptive, they need to be moved out, and then worked on. So, and hopefully they can be brought back. But they may need a different learning situation. But you can't destroy the learning of the classroom, and the teacher can't be distracted. You can't, if there's a social service need. The teacher can't stop teaching and deal with the social service need. That's an important need. Social services have to be brought in. I think we need to ask a lot more of our families, and of our students, and of our educational system, meaning our teachers. And that the first half, probably K through 12, is more kind of the basic learning. And then I think in the second half, you really need to start tracking along a route of interest and aptitude. So that some people, it's pre-college, some they can be great builders, some they can fix things, some they can, a whole variety. And you might have leadership, you might have music and art focus, because some of the beauty of life is music and art. If you have a wonderful musician, they should be spending a lot of time with that in their actual education and training. I think that would be fabulous. And ideally, the parent and the child with input from the system talk about aptitude and help direct the student to where they're going to get their final part of their training as they head toward finishing. And ultimately, we want to have, just like in private school, the money follows the child. So that leads to a lot of improvement in performance, because people want to have a job. And private schools know that if they're not attractive to the parents and to the students, they're not going to have students, they're not going to have a job. So that, unfortunately, as human beings, we need that encouragement too when we work, that there are expectations and standards, and if we're falling down on those, the way you can really find out is no one wants to be educated or trained by you. I think those are key. A few comments on what we're doing right now in terms of, the governor is the superintendent of schools, and this governor, if elected, is very interested in a sequential curriculum that builds year to year, if that makes sense. And the focusing solely on the idea that the purpose of education is to replace ignorance with knowledge and training. That the only indoctrination that our students should have is at the end of going through the process, they should have a great love of our country. Not that we're not ever talking about anything that's not perfect, but a great love of our country.
Yes.
And the things you see that are all over the news and all that, critical race theory, that's a theory of some African American scholars at a high level of university, that they feel that that American society, much of the effort in our history was made to keep African Americans down. I think that if that is someone who wants to study that in a college seminar or an advanced high school seminar on pre-college, that's okay to have a seminar. No way does it filter down in any other place. This idea of human sexuality in our children, I remember, and I realized I was educated a while ago, but as puberty approached, there were some nervous discussions about that and what that means. Parents were brought in and involved. Right. That was really an issue for the families to take on. And when you talk about a gender curriculum or a human sexuality curriculum for kindergartners, the people who think that would not have a role in Governor Pierce's educational system.
Well,
because it's so inappropriate. Children that are kindergartners chasing butterflies, pretending they're a bee, looking at anthills, learning their numbers and stuff. I mean, it's so wildly insane and crazy. It's hard. And it's just way off the rails. So we're not going to have that. It's just not going to be.
Good.
Period.
Amen. Well, and I like what you're saying about the idea of putting the parents and the money following this child, because then the parent is in control and say, you know what, I don't want that, and then we are communicating to the education that you guys are way off path. That's not what we want for our kids, and it gives them the opportunity to choose what they do want for their children, which I think is extremely important.
And it's everything I'm saying is totally frightening. I understand that to the people in place, and my goal for any employee that's ever worked for me is to do everything that I can to make that employee successful in their work, happy in their work, have creativity and input in their work. I'm not there to harm people or take it away, but we have to, again, get our focus on the goals, and the goals are that education and training are to replace ignorance, and we're not interested in indoctrination other than loving our country. And this whole idea of human sexuality and the sexual exploitation of our youth is a huge problem to anyone that looks at it in our society, and it's completely nuts to talk about gender and sexuality to kindergartners or any young child. I mean, I would say that actually for most children, and when that discussion occurs, that the parents have to be involved, because a parent is a family unit, and if we don't have competent parents or any parents, well, we can find surrogates that'll do it outside of the educational process. It's that's just how it needs to be.
I like that. I like that very much. In fact, I'm reminded of the scripture that says that anyone who would cause a small child to stumble and fall, they would be better off with that really big millstone tied around their neck and dropped in the deepest part of the sea. And so I'm glad to hear that you have that very thought in mind, that you want to protect, those children that need to be protected so that they can learn and grow and be educated.
Absolutely.
Well, it has been absolutely delightful to have you here. And is there something else that perhaps would be on your thoughts or mind that you would like for the viewers that are watching this to hear that we've maybe not covered?
I think you've done a great job of covering the major issues that are in front of us. I'd ask each of you to search your heart and to put a little effort into this election. I think, again, if we want better leaders and leaders that can make the changes and help us together create the society that we want, people need to put a little work into it, just like the education of our students, and find out about the candidates and who they really are as people, because and find out what they've done in the past, because what people have done in the past is most likely what they're going to do going forward. And if people say they have let's say a sketchy past and they make all these promises going forward, guess what? It's not going to happen. And politics is full of people, honestly, in my view, that have a lot of charisma. I'm obviously not one of them, and who have a great power of speech and that can convince you. I'm obviously not one of them. But again, just be careful, because again, actions, as we say, it's trite, but actions speak louder than words. What people have done, they're likely to do going forward. Find out about the candidate if you can, who they are as a person.
Right.
Hard to do, but actually in the information world, it's maybe not so hard to do. I'd find out.
Right.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, and no matter what, no matter whether you want to vote for me or not, keep praying for me, because I want to be a great representative of our Lord and bring positivity to the process. So whether you think Bud Pierce should ever get elected to anything, that doesn't matter, but pray for me so that I'm a great ambassador.
Amen.
And if I can, say, rather, God has blessed me to know this man's heart, and his heart, he's very kind and very humble, and he likes to help people.
Yes.
Already he's helping people as a doctor, but he wants to reach out.
Yes. He wants to
more people. He wants to
expand his territories to benefit all of us here in
Expand
this
the practice.
That's
Expand
right.
the practice.
Yes.
Amen
To
to
the
that.
whole entire
I agree.
36 counties.
Amen. There you go.
Thanks, folks. Thank you.